Hello, everybody. This is John Koch from MediStreams, and this is our first podcast. We call this our Revenue Cycle Chalk Talk series. With me today is Jeanne Marvine.
Hi, everyone. Hi, John. I'm Jeanne Marvine. I'm Vice President of Sales with MediStreams. Been working in the healthcare revenue cycle arena for 12 years now.
Excellent. And also with us today is Sharon Frascogna.
Hello, everyone. Sharon Frascogna. I'm the Vice President of Strategic Relationships at MediStreams, and I have 25 years of experience in healthcare banking as well as healthcare technology.
And I'm your host, John Koch, the COO here at MediStreams and CRO now. I've been in the healthcare revenue cycle space since 2000, makes 23 years now. I still feel young, but 23 years in the revenue cycle. And we're here today to talk about change in the revenue cycle and the cost of doing nothing. And one of the biggest factors over the past few years for revenue cycle change has been the dreaded COVID and all of the lockdowns that affected everybody, especially within the revenue cycle and billing offices. So, Jeanne, how has the COVID lockdowns affected some of the clients that you work with?
Well, it's interesting. It's a good question. I would say lockdowns created a sense of urgency in some people, perhaps, in that maybe they had been thinking about making some changes, and then suddenly, we were all thrown into this collective nightmare, and those changes became a little more urgent. I had people calling me and saying, we were thinking about lockbox next year or whatever, but I need it now. We can't get into the office. No one can get in. We have mail sitting on the floor. No one can open it. Live checks. Had one client that was actually for 3 months, no one could get into the office. They were based in Chicago. So it really sort of highlighted the need that, we see the need every day, but it really magnified it, I guess is the best way to say it. Following your sports analogy there, John, I would say that, when I'm talking to people and they're looking at, maybe layering in some automation, playing not to lose is not a winning strategy. And I think we see a lot of that in revenue cycle offices. We see that we have a process, it's going along, we're okay. And I think playing not to lose, again, is not going to win you a whole lot. And in today's world, it's so competitive. And staffing is competitive. That's a big issue for a lot of people I talk to. So you have to be willing to imagine what it would look like if you could layer in and you could improve this process and you could have some automation that would relieve the burden from your office of some of these tasks, like the mail and opening the mail and getting the checks in the bank, et cetera, converting your paper EOBs into a automated file that posts just like an ERA, reconciling your ERAs to your EFTs. I mean, what would that look like? And to imagine that world, I think COVID brought that home for a lot of people, the lockdowns, because they had to start thinking outside the box. They had to get creative. So I saw a lot of people maybe more willing to embrace the change during that time because they just had to survive. And it was a scary, dangerous time for a lot of people. So in many ways.
I agree. Yeah, there were a lot of people, especially when it comes to mail and the fact that they have live checks sitting in an office, but they can't get to that office, especially in cities where the lockdown and regulations were tighter. We did see some clients in other cities who they were able to get people into the office, but in other cities, like you mentioned, Chicago, they were not allowed to even go to the office, and they had live checks
That's
sitting
right.
in the inbox and nobody able to deposit those. That impacts cash flow. Sharon, have you seen a change due to COVID from the lockbox or other perspectives of the revenue cycle?
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen it for health systems on both the payables and the receivables side, where as you guys have stated, they had challenges getting into the offices, or some of the staff may not feel comfortable, or they only wanted certain leadership levels to be in the office, and they were looking for ways on both from a disbursements perspective, but especially on the receivables side. People were having to go into the office at executive levels just to make those deposits. And if they were previously using like an online deposit solution, those solutions weren't even utilized, as those individuals were usually just dropping them off at a bank or something. So whereas they put some semi-automation in place, that really didn't work in this and you're just seeing long-term changes in not only the ways, the automation and the technology that some of these organizations are using on both the disbursements and the receivable side, but also the mindsets of these organizations are now allowing for some remote employees, because and this helps when employees have a sick kid at home, or they're sick. They're able to work now from home versus being down one staff member. And with these additional solutions, it allows them to scale a little bit better, versus just being days or weeks behind potentially, because they don't have the staff to do that.
That's right. And you see a lot of clients who need to get automated now in days instead of months, to convert to a lockbox and automate that mail room. That is a 3-month process minimum to get all of those addresses changed. Now what we're seeing is clients wanting to fast track that process, even forwarding that mail to a lockbox, which can be a challenge because traditional bank lockboxes, they don't want to receive mail through these non-standard mechanisms, right? They don't want the mail forwarded. They want those addresses changed. Make sure that the mail's going organically to the lockbox. Opening packages incurs additional cost, which sometimes can be exorbitant. So even with all of these challenges, there are still people within the billing office who are somewhat resistant to change. And how do providers overcome this resistance to change in the revenue cycle? What do you think, Jeanne?
I think it's tough. I think that that's probably the biggest obstacle to moving forward. I think, as I was saying earlier, that people are just hardwired to resist change. And to be fair, a lot of change is thrown at them, right? I mean, things are always changing, whether it's CPT codes or COVID threw us all into a lot of change, of course. But they work so hard. There's no shortage of things to do in a billing office ever, and I think they're just stuck in this mode. They have a process, it works, but, they're not ever moving the bar, right? And more stuff gets thrown at them, and what they do is they just work harder. And it's like, let's see what we can do to kinda alleviate some of that pain for you, some of that headache, and have things function more smoothly with less stress and less, human effort, especially with all the staffing challenges we have today. It takes so much to get a good staff in place, and just when you have a full staff, you're losing one or two, something happens, they move or something happens, and then you have to do it all over again and hire people and train them and onboard them, and then it's 6 months later, somebody leaves, and it's just a revolving door. Automation stays with you. So you have to try to layer it in. My advice would be to layer it in where you can. You know, Obviously you're still going to have your necessary staff and your people, but doing that allows your people to function more efficiently. And what I see is that they have found money, right? They don't even know what's leaking because they're so busy getting the payments posted. They're so busy opening the mail and scanning everything. So alleviate some of that busy work where you can, and allow your people to function at a higher level, I think is really important.
They're not seeing the forest through the trees. And
Exactly.
getting buy-in from the team can be difficult. In fact, we even have people on our own team who are very change resistant, and their inclination is that will never work when you first bring an idea to them. And what's
Right.
interesting is you know, those are the people who you want to make sure are happy the most, because those are people who really care about your business, whether it's, on our side as a RCM vendor or in the client billing office. Getting buy-in from the team is important, especially those people who are very change resistant. Those can be ultimately your biggest proponents for change, but they do require a little bit of extra time, a little bit of consulting, so that they can understand the value and see what that life after change would look like. We see it in our own shop. Um, you know, Thinking about the big picture versus day to day is hugely important. And what I have seen in one of my large dermatology groups is sometimes change happens whether you like it or not. And when you are working in a company that's growing through acquisition, a lot of times you need to expand that billing office extremely fast in order to keep up with the additional volume. And by implementing change, that client was able to grow their top line revenue 4x while keeping the existing staff, just by implementing changes to their revenue cycle.
That's
So
huge.
what are some of the lessons learned regarding bringing change to the revenue cycle? What are your thoughts on that, Sharon?
Lessons learned by bringing change to the rev cycle. When they're willing to do that and make that leap, as a lot of organizations were willing to do during COVID, and they wanted that in days or weeks rather than months, as you stated, John. I think they've realized that it's a better use of their staff's time, because they can focus them on more on tasks that are really more important to them, like looking at denials specifically, or looking at secondary claims that were crossed over that they didn't send a claim out. Some of those insights and tools that they have the tools that they can now utilize to look at those insights and change that whole process to get revenue in the door for some of those denials or appeals where they may not have responded in a timely manner. So it's just a more efficient use of their staff's time. It's not getting rid of the staffs, it's just reallocating them to those more important responsibilities for the organization, because they're automating those mindless tasks of opening mail, manually posting payments. They're only focused on working those few exceptions and then focusing in on how do we improve our billing process based on the payment information or the denials we're getting back from these different payers. I just think it makes everything more efficient, and it ensures that they're able to scale and that they're able to get paid correctly the first time, versus having to go back and forth on denials or appeals and that type of thing.
All
So
right.
John, with everything Sharon just said, how would you suggest someone implement change? Who would they look for? What would they look for in a vendor that would, really be in their best interest?
You know, I personally think that there are lots of great vendors out there who have good products and can bring change to the revenue cycle. But I think choosing one is very important. You need to choose one who will be very consultative. Revenue cycle is not a one size fits all solution. Revenue cycle is very complex, and every single billing office, finance team, payment applications team, they all are organized differently and they all have very unique challenges. I have yet to see the exact same challenges at the exact same type of client, even within the exact same industry, dermatology, radiology, even large institutional providers. From one to the next, there's just a plethora of different challenges that they experience. For example, maybe Blockbox and mail and EOBs isn't the real challenge. It's the correspondence that comes along with that and categorizing it and being able to follow up timely. To Sharon's point, making sure that you're not ignoring those denials. A lot of times that goes to the wayside because people are more, focused on applying those payments. So if you can work with a vendor who consults with you and makes absolutely sure that they're addressing the specific need, not just giving you a product, you'll be a lot better off. You're going to overcome that resistance to change. You're going to be able to see the value, and you're really able to then layer on, you're solving that first problem. Now you're able to layer on and solve additional problems. And a lot of vendors out there will just say, this is my product, implement it, and it's a one size fits all solution. And I think that is why a lot of people are resistant to that change to begin with. So anything else that we want to talk about, ladies?
I would just add that, to really embrace the opportunities for change out there for improvement, because the world's moving fast and healthcare revenue cycle moves very fast, and the pressure to get the payments in the bank, et cetera. And whether your company is growing by acquisition or you have a lot of staffing issues, we all need to be exploring options and really try to envision where we could improve our process and what opportunities are out there. So I would really encourage people to just take a look, to see what's out there, to vet some solutions, and to embrace the opportunities, because there's great solutions out there that will improve your process. We've seen incredible results. So I would just really encourage people. People get stuck, and get unstuck, and open up to some of the possibilities.
I like that. Get unstuck. So get unstuck. That's how we
Get
will
unstuck.
close. I want to thank everybody for joining us today, especially thank you, Jeanne and Sharon, for joining me today. And we plan on having many more podcasts covering everything from AI and automation in the revenue cycle, MIPS and pay for performance, medical lockbox, staffing challenges, closing out end of month. No shortage of topics in revenue cycle, and we hope everybody will join us for those future podcasts. So stay tuned, and we'd love to hear your feedback. So for everybody listening, please reach out via LinkedIn or shoot us a message at MediStreams.com. Love to hear your feedback, not only on this podcast, but even for future podcast topics. Excited to get this series kicked off. And I'm looking forward to meeting with you, Sharon and Jeanne, again in future podcasts. And we will see you on the next one. Thank you so much for joining us.